Okay, these are from the book Holy Grail of Wisdom Quotes by me, Pete Rogers. Jean Piaget is a great educator. He lived from 1896 to 1980. In his younger years, he worked with Binet on the Binet IQ test, and he knows a lot about children leading. The guy was a genius, and he's sort of been called the baby biographer of learning how children learn to help them. Okay, and he basically felt you should let the child discover as much as they can on their own, and then sort of help them along from there. You know, a little bit like that idea of Vygotsky scaffolding, if you will. A little bit like the idea of Montessori. Let the children explore their environment and play. You know, children need time to play. Let's see. He felt you should let the kid discover it is better than you just telling the kid, because that interaction with the material, with life, gets them to understand it in a sense. Okay. He said, we understand things based on what we know. That is our frame of reference, which goes to, you know, the way you learn anything is you associate it with what you already know. You form a comparison, a likeness, an analogy, a simile, a metaphor, and that's how you process it into your mind. You know, it barks, it's like a dog. It says meow, it's like a cat. It walks on four legs. Okay, all of that is how we add information to our brain. So anytime you want to understand something, just ask yourself, what is this like? What is this not like? What does this remind me of? How does this make me feel? Okay, Piaget said, you know, some people tried to have students watch other people swim and then see if they could swim themselves. He says, you need to do more than just watch. You need to participate in the activity. He says the principal goal of education in schools should be to create men and women who are capable of doing new things, not simply repeating what other generations have done. Men and women who are creative, inventive, and discoverers, who can be critical and verify, not accept everything they're offered. Yeah, so you want people to, you know, you have to start out with the basics, learn how to write, but then they should try to write something based on their experience. They should practice speaking, you know, being able to perform, being able to question things and judge, be skeptical. Okay, Piaget observed that kids have concrete operations until about 7 years of age. They're not really capable of abstract thought. But as they get older, about when they hit puberty, they become more capable of abstract thought, what he called formal operations. Okay, during the first few months of life, they start developing all the habits, and that's the beginning of being able to process things and start making those metaphors. Mama, papa, baba. Play is the answer to how anything new comes about. Play is the work of childhood. Children require long, uninterrupted periods of play and exploration. Yeah, I would say, I've seen that. You know, I studied all these lives of geniuses. They often have a prolonged phase of intense loneliness where they have to learn to entertain themselves. And the best way to entertain yourself is to read. So, like, for example, I was on in-school detention suspension for like 2 years when I was young because I was behavior disorder, okay? And what it was, I was just smart. I'd do the homework in 5 minutes, and then I was class clown, wanted to make my friends laugh. Okay, but, you know, when I was alone by myself, I had nothing to do. They let me go to the library, so I had books to read. I did all the SRA, Scholastic Reader Association. I went through that whole thing, you know, cover to cover, front to back. That was good for me. My dad read a lot, so I wanted to read books like my dad. So that was where I sort of really educated myself in youth. And I also think the fact I was in trouble so much when I was a kid, just for, you know, being class clown, it prevented me from being so conformist because I wasn't always stuck in it. And I think also having parents from foreign countries is good for kids in the sense that my father was from Ireland. So I had this whole Irish thing going on with my dad and his brothers, my uncles. And my mom was from Puerto Rico, so I saw how all the Puerto Ricans behaved. And that was good for me. And I grew up around a bunch of Italians, so I was always seeing how Italians are. So I sort of had this variety of perspectives that I think was, you know, not that common. Anyways, let's see what else. Piaget, he says, each time one prematurely tells a child something he could have figured out for himself, the child is kept from discovering it on his own and consequently from understanding it completely. Teaching means creating situations where structures can be discovered. Yeah, where kids can get experience, interaction with a concept, with a new thing. And that's like Ayn Rand has said, kids do better around adults and older siblings than they do around kids their own age, because the older people know more than the kid does. They can teach them something. When they're around kids their own age, they just want to be popular. It becomes a social thing rather than an intellectual thing. Piaget, experience precedes understanding. Children have real understanding only of that which they figure out for themselves. And that's a little bit like what Schopenhauer said. Schopenhauer said in real life, you have an experience, and then you try to understand it and you talk to people about it. And that's a normal way to learn, versus he says in school, You have just the text and you're told stuff to trust and believe all kinds of things that you have no experience with and you don't really understand. Okay, Piaget, education for most people means trying to lead the child to resemble the typical adult of his society. But for me and for no one else, education means making creators. You have to make inventors, innovators, not conformists. And I would say, you should teach kids things that, let's say, you are going to need to know, though, as an adult. You need to know math only really about addition, subtraction, multiplication, and a little division, and you need to know what fractions are, okay? But you don't need much more math than that for most people, for 99% of the population. And I think, you shouldn't force a grade school kid to know stuff that a smart adult doesn't know, okay? There's a lot of valuable stuff they don't learn. What's the difference between how men behave and how women behave? Okay, what's it like to start a business, to run your own company, to be an entrepreneur, to finance something? How does the stock market work? What's it like to own things? What do you need to know to be an owner and the boss rather than just an employee? Okay, Jean Piaget. Intelligence is what you use when you don't know what to do. I'd say a good book for young people to read is, Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I thought that was a real good introduction to economics book. Anyways, hope you found that helpful.